Oh, what's up? Hey guys, how are you? My name's Aiden, and welcome to another Grand Launch Media video. Today, as many of you know, I'm a wedding photographer, at least that's what I specialize in, as well as other events. And today I'm going to show you how to edit weddings, or how I edit different weddings from a couple months ago. So we're going to start off with this image, which is kind of just that grand image that you see on most wedding photographers' websites, a wide angle of the ceremony. As you can see, it's a little bit off center just because I was slightly misaligned when I was taking the photo. To easily fix that, I'm just going to go to the crop tool and go to angle. I normally try to find something that's a straight line across the photo. So I'm going to use this back wall, for example, to kind of fix it and then eyeball it. And another good tool to use is to use the archway as it's really close to the angle, and you can also eyeball it like this. But that's always risky because it's not as consistent as using the angle tool. So now that this is straight, I normally always crop my images down to 4:5 and then straighten the subject a little bit like that. The reason I do 4:5 is just because that's a good printing or base printer for if the couple wants to print these images down the line. It's also the dimensions used for Instagram, so it just kind of makes sense. And it also gives you a little bit more to use if you want to use it. So now that we crop the image down, I'm going to go ahead and start editing it. I prefer more brighter, a little less vibrant photos when it comes to coloring, so I normally up the exposure a little bit. For this one, I'm not going to do very much, just to plus 3.35. And I normally bring up the contrast a little bit just to bring the image or the subjects of the bride and groom a little bit more into detail. As you can see, the sky is a little bit washed out, so to bring that down, I'm going to bring highlights pretty much all the way down. I'm going to bring the shadows down slightly, bring up the whites. I'm also going to increase blacks a little bit, just to provide more color. And then to kind of help the sky a little bit more, I'm going to increase dehaze probably to around there, just so you see a little bit more of the sky. I normally always bring in up texture and clarity to around 15 or 20 just to provide a little more detail if it requires it. I don't think it requires it clarity as much, so I'm actually going to decrease it a little bit. And texture wise, I'm going to leave it around 22. Another thing I always make sure to do is go to a subject that, for this example, I'm going to zoom in on the bride and groom. Use the hue tool, this little thing right here, and I always just check the tones of their skin and just make sure it looks natural. It changed orange once to +1. I normally eyeball it, and so yeah, that's pretty much all I would do for this image. I would go back and go through Photoshop to take some of the petals out of the grass, or maybe add some detail, but this one doesn't really require it as much. For the second image, we have the bride next to a rose bush, and I just love bringing out colors when it's possible, and especially with the flowers right here. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the top, increase exposure just a little bit. Like I said earlier, I normally am between plus 0.3 and 0.5. Bring out the contrast. Again, bring down highlights as it's really white for the sky up above. Bring up shadows a little bit. I'm actually going to decrease the whites a little bit, just help out the clouds, and it doesn't take away from the dress too much. I'm also going to increase blacks just to make it a little bit brighter. And for texture and clarity, I'm actually going to leave it at 0 just because it's in a really good detail already. But I'm going to only bring up the dehaze to probably about 15, so you have a little more detail. And I'm also going to bring up the saturation just to bring out the colors a little bit more, and also increase the vibrance. Just slightly, and not too much. And again, I always bring down the images to 4.5. I'm going to bring this first line right to eye level and go ahead and just crop down to there. Here's a quick before and after, kind of just bringing her up a little bit more, bringing out the color, filling in this area a little bit, and just making it a beautiful photo. And this is one of my favorite photos I took that entire day. The sun really didn't come out that entire time. It was covered by a lot of clouds, which was helpful for how hot it is, but this is one of the last photos we took. We were on a giant golf course. I know it's hard to kind of tell on the rest of these images as we tried to hide it, me and the photography team that was there. But for this photo, it was very blown out, just to try and still provide a little bit of detail down here for after edits. So for this one, I'm not going to increase the exposure that much, just because I'll increase it slightly, but it blows it out a little bit more, but it helps bring it back into focus the bride and groom. I'm going to increase contrast also, just so they're at the forefront. I'm going to bring highlights pretty much all the way down. As you can see, we're starting to see some detail in these clouds, and hopefully when we're done going through all the steps, we'll be able to see a little bit of blue or a little bit more detail. I'm going to bring up shadows a little bit too. Going to bring down the whites to bring a little more detail out. Bring up black slightly. I'm actually going to bring up detail or the texture up just a little bit more. Clarity, I'll decrease it a little bit. I'm going to bring the dehaze a little bit into it, so you can see a lot more detail. You can see the dress, you can see the detail of the sky. And for this one, I would normally crop it to 4.5, but I actually kind of like where it's at. I'm just going to decrease it where it was naturally taken, just so they're a little bit more in frame. I'm going to go to the saturation, try to increase the colors of just the flowers, and to kind of do that, I'm just going to go to the mask tool and put it on a brush tool. Okay, basically I'm just going to apply mask over the photos, automatically set everything back down to 0. Basically I just want to try to bring up the colors without causing everything else to increase as well. So move down to saturation, increase the reds a little bit, not so much the oranges. Now one thing you have to do is make sure you invert it so it actually affects the mask and not everything around it, because it was affecting the colors outside of it. I don't know if you caught that when I was adjusting the yellow. So basically that's how I would edit this photo. It's kind of one of those photos that I just love taking, and I did something a little bit different, and it's a little bit slightly different than the style I would go for, as I would just bring out more colors instead of desaturating it a little bit, just try and bring out the flower colors. So yeah, that's how I would edit this photo. Here's a quick before and after. I just filled in the bride and groom a little bit more, brought out more details in the clouds, and this is probably one of my favorite photos I've taken. And here's a quick before and after of all the photos, a little more detail. So yeah, I love doing weddings and I love editing them. If you have any questions, comment down below. Make sure you like this video, and who knows, we might do something in the future with wildlife, with lifestyle photography, as we have a lot of other really good photographers on the team with a lot of different specializations, and we would love to explore more options in the future. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Peace out.